Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Dynasty Underdog. I'm your host, Uriah Dawkins. With me tonight, Jake Hornbloom at Jake Abrams. Billy cannot be with us tonight because he lost his voice. So, welcome aboard, Jake. How you doing?
Dude, I'm doing all right. I'm fighting a small bug. Sounds like everyone is right now, but I'm doing better than Billy, and I guess that in its own right is my early season championship. So that's what I'm looking at. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Recording on a Thursday. Couldn't go on Tuesday, but all in all, doing pretty well. So let's hop into
Good.
it, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
Start with some news and nonsense. So what we wanted to talk about briefly on Tuesday was with waivers and all that. Like, is it worth attacking waivers or of these types of players, like the Kareem Hunts, the Tyler Huntley, the Skylers, even like the Samaji P Ryans? Like, is that really worth our time to go for those guys, or should we let other players in the leagues kind of like spend their fab on them? Because not very often do they actually pan out. What's your quick take on that?
Yeah, I think if you can do it in a cost-effective way, there's always a window. So I'll typically put in like a minimal offer for those types of guys, somewhere in like the 5 to 7% range. And if I land it, awesome. But if someone else puts in 50%, then that's on them and they lose. What about you?
I'm kind of the same way. Like honestly, like those are probably the type of guys like I quote unquote miss out on, but like I think we see time and time again that like it's more of a waste of fab than anything. Um, Unlike a guy like Steele who has like more of a clear cut path to production. So
Yeah. And Josh is asking, shout out Josh Goldberg, better waiver pickup, Huntley or Skylar Thompson?
um, I kind of like the idea of Huntley more than Skyler just because Huntley we've seen him actually be pretty good there in Baltimore, uh, and he has legs that I don't think Skyler has.
Yeah. Pure fantasy output. I do think that Huntley does have a larger window when he is playing. Obviously, Skylar's going to he has been in the organization a little bit longer, so he is
Mm-hmm.
going to start immediately. But yeah, I think longer term, Huntley probably has a little bit more value. All right, thanks,
All right,
Josh.
cool. Let's talk about the Justin Field of dreams. I love this because for whatever reason, he's one of those guys that like I continually stick up for, and I probably shouldn't. But yeah, Justin Fields, he's been starting the last 2 weeks. Russell Wilson's been injured. The question here is, can he rebound into a steady dynasty asset, or is it time to sell, sell, sell?
That's for me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I almost want to hear your feedback first because I
I know that's why I
notoriously
stopped.
I'm
I
notoriously
don't
an
want to be biased
anti-Fields
because I
guy.
always, it's kind of like I've done for Baker in the past. I don't, I'm always going to constantly stick up for. And Justin Fields has been one of those guys for me. He's doing okay. I mean, we just saw reports today from like Pickens talking about how Justin Fields is that dude. Uh, I feel like if Justin Fields doesn't get injured, there's no reason for them to start. Or yeah, Justin Fields doesn't get injured. I don't see there's a reason for them to start Russell Wilson.
It's a really interesting dichotomy of, general on-field success from a team perspective versus a player perspective. And I think right now, from an organization, AJ says Bustin Fields.
Yeah, he
As
could be. Yeah.
from an organization perspective, they're 2-0, right? Like
Yes.
they're winning games that they're supposed to, but also in the same right, I think people were skeptical with Justin Fields being the starting quarterback when Russ was named the starter. What was it, like 4 or 6 weeks ago, going into the regular season before this calf injury started? So it does beg to question what the long-term success looks like and whether or not the depth chart stays as is. I think to Uriah's point, this does feel like it's Justin's job to now lose because they
Yep.
have won 2 games in a row. I do think from a fantasy and dynasty aspect, he hasn't really performed at a very high level in terms of usability. And that for me is kind of scary. Like, I don't personally like assets like Justin Fields. And if this is a window where there's someone else who's willing to spend a first on him already, even in Superflex, I would be more than happy to sell for a first, knowing that that's probably a great way to get out. there's obviously a relatively long window for the season to improve for him. This dude is probably dealing with a lot of general confidence issues, just knowing that an organization basically just gave up on him and he's getting his second shot immediately. But yeah, what about you? Is there a certain price that you'd be willing to either buy or sell at?
Yeah, if I had spare quarterbacks to go, and I could get on Justin Fields. I think for a first here, I believe that any starting quarterback, especially with his pedigree and age, I think it's worth the first. But I just basically be honest with you, I'm too scared to buy into it. That's just
Fair.
I mean, I don't want to take that risk, but I think something else is like, yeah, he hasn't performed, fantasy points production, but like, how many quarterbacks have so far through 2 weeks?
That's reasonable. I think all in all, it does kind of, for me, depend on the usage. Like his actual usage is really much more kind of just like allowing the game to flow in a specific direction. And that for me doesn't feel like it has legs to it, no pun intended. I just don't know how or if we're going to see in this Steelers offense Fields used to the way that we would want him to from a fantasy asset. And that's kind of my fear in general. But I agree with you. The NFL landscape for quarterback production has not been great. And so it's not like I think he is currently averaging like 12 and a half points per game. He's probably falling right there in the, probably like 17, 18 range. That's not terrible. But is that worth a first? Probably not for me.
Yeah. This could be another discussion if we see this same trend happen over the course of this weekend. What are we going to do with our second super flex spot? Is it even going to be worth putting in a quarterback there anymore?
I saw you post that on Twitter, actually, or X, and I think that was a legitimately great question to start questioning. Especially in certain point scoring settings, there are spaces where a QB2 does not even actually stand that much value in comparison to a high end running back or even a tight end 3 on some teams. If you're going tight end bully and you're playing 0.75 TEP, there's situations where there's a lot of value there.
Yeah. I think that might be something we have to talk about because, 10 to 12 points from my quarterback 2 just isn't cutting it in Superflex right now. So
yeah. And, to AJ's point, the time to buy Fields was in the offseason when, the massive dip was there. And it's a great shout. This was a situation where a lot of people thought and knew that there was great competition between these two quarterbacks because of kind of the decline of both of them as assets, not necessarily as athletes, but specifically as assets. And yeah, it made sense to kind of buy into both of them. Fortunately, if you bought both, you're looking better than the person who just only put in on Russ. So yeah, something to look at.
All right, the next quarterback we're going to talk about here is Tua Tagovailoa. So we all saw him get the concussion. Well, you might have because you were just enjoying yourself over there in Copenhagen, which I'm sure you don't care. Too bad to have missed that. But Tua Tagovailoa, he was going towards the goal line. He was in 10 yards out, 8 yards out, something like that, and he put his head down. He lost the battle and got another concussion. So I think the team put him on IR to let him have time to figure out what he's going to do. And reports are saying that he has no plans to retire. So with that said, do you think that Tua is worth investing in or completely out on him?
I actually spoke about this a little bit with Billy on the side. Maybe that's why he put this in. And I was talking about one of my greatest, I guess, deficits in general is allowing my own inherent bias for my own head injuries as an athlete kind of impacts the way in which I viewed this Tua situation specifically, which is funny because that trade actually happened in DU2 between the two of us. I think I sent Tua, Nick Chubb, and like a fourth for Trevor Lawrence at the time. And this was right at the tail end of the season. It must have been, I want to say, going into the championship game. You needed some additional high scoring points. So Chubb helped out in that situation. and Tua wasn't going to be playing because I think you had like 4 or 5 quarterbacks on that roster, something crazy like that. What ended up happening was I think Chubb ended up killing. You beat Billy in the final, and then Chubb unfortunately ended up getting injured like week 1 the following year, and then Tua didn't have a concussion up until this most recent break. So I think all in all, value-wise, it worked out probably more in your favor than mine. Most realistically, the reason I bring that up is I think I was out on Tua as a dynasty asset at that point in time, and this only further concerns me as just a general buyer of assets like Tua. We're now looking at 4 at least known concussions in his career, including college.
Good way to put
3
it.
of
Yeah.
which unfortunately ended in the I forgot what that position is called, fencing position, and it's not something that I particularly want to be a part of anymore. Just from both a playing, like this is a fun thing to play, like I play it for fun, and I don't want to continue to support someone who I don't want to get hurt anymore on the field. So that's kind of how I look at it. What about you?
I'm the same way there. I'm actually pretty heavy on Tua. Obviously, that's been made more aware to me after this last injury. And I mean, the fact is, he's not like extremely great for fantasy. He's fine. I think, honestly, what I'm hoping right now is that he does come back and he plays pretty well. And maybe towards the end of the season, I will probably do the same thing that you did and get off of him. Right now is not the time. He's going to go on my art and he's going to chill out there. His head's going to get straight, and we'll see. It's amazing to me having the weapons he has on his offense with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, that Tua actually is kind of mid for fantasy. So couple that with the concussion thing, I think that this year, God willing, he comes back and is healthy, I will probably look to get off of him.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Andres posted in the chat as well, Bryce Young to Miami next year. It's an interesting shout. I don't think that that's a terrible situation in general. I think it could be worth just the experiment if you are an organization like Miami and you have to basically get off of this massive contract. I'm sure there's some type of buyout if it is injury related, where Tua basically is no longer playing. It's interesting. I probably wouldn't buy in, but it's something I would be interested in seeing. He follows up and says that Miami also has 7 picks next year. So there's a lot of fluidity that they could potentially trade out and get someone like Bryce. Yeah. It's a thought for sure. And I don't know if it needs to be kind of talked about anymore, but it's definitely worth the idea and in dreamland of that being a possibility.
Yeah, I think it's a little too early to have that discussion, but I'm also personally like just rooting for Bryce. So
yeah,
we'll see how this plays out. Again, we just finished week 2.
It's crazy. It feels like we're halfway through the season already.
Well, yeah, with all the if you just add up the injuries, and you think we're in like week 10. Oh my God, it's been a disaster. All right, so Cooper Kupp. Billy, cup half full. I like how we did that. So should we buy Kupp off the injury for contending teams, and what's the most you'd send? I could say here honestly, because Jake knows, I did buy Kupp. I bought him before the season started. With the injury, I think like he's going to come back. They didn't put him on IR. They're thinking that he's able to come back. So even like a 90% Kupp or 80% Kupp, still a pretty good value. I think honestly, like there's probably a lot of people really freaking out right now. I do think he might be a buy. If you're contending, like I think that might not be a bad decision.
I think the IR designation actually isn't that telling, unfortunately. And the reason I say that is because I think I almost called him Tua. The Puka injury is actually significantly worse than they're letting on. And from what I've seen and read, it could be anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks before he's back. I hope that's not true. This could be a situation where we're kind of seeing a situation where they're kind of manipulating the roster a little bit to hopefully have cut back sooner rather than later. But I've seen everything say it's a high ankle sprain. We're probably talking 4 to 6 weeks as well. So I hope that's not the case. It looked really bad on that replay. I did watch that on Twitter like 12 times because I also have Cup. I have like 3 or 4 shares, which is one of the reasons why I actually sold out of him to you. You know, we talk about it. None of us are portfolio players, but I still like to think a little bit in a portfolio, even with my, 9 teams, 10 teams.
Yes.
Like, I don't need 70% exposure to Cooper Cup, especially with his history. And even if, 90% of my teams are contending, I think it's okay to get off of players like that, even if I potentially lost that trade 1-for-1. Because funny enough, and Evan Ingram pulled up lame with a hamstring injury in practice, or not practice. It was warm-up, pregame warm-up, I think, actually.
When I saw the news, I'm like, what the hell did this come from?
It's garbage. Yeah. It's a garbage year so far in terms of player health. But, to answer Billy's question, what is the most I'd send? I'd probably send at most right now a mid-second, knowing that he has had an ankle injury in the past. I don't know what the health is like. I don't know really, even with that IR designation, kind of where it lives. It scares me. So I think a mid-second is kind of a safe bet. What about you?
I think you're right. I don't know if anybody would sell for that though. So yeah, I think the prospect of Cooper Cup getting added in a trade probably is more of a, not a 1-to-1, but more of a bigger package where he's part of it.
Yeah. In the same quarterback conversation, AJ, before we drop into idle speeds, did want to bring up, is Justin Herbert a buy, or is he just screwed with his current situation?
I don't know. I don't know. You want to buy the talent, right? The investment that the league organization has in him. He hasn't been spectacular for fantasy either. But you want to believe because the talent's there. I don't think with the offensive coordinator and head coach there at the moment that you're going to see some huge boom of production from Herbert, where if you're buying now that he's going to be worth more 6 months from now. I'm just not really sure. I mean, I think whatever the community values him at right now is probably correct. I don't know. That's a tricky one. Just given the offensive scheme that we're seeing from them right now, it's really kind of hard for me to put my finger on it. Now, if Kellen Moore was still there and it was like his second year and things get better, I could see something like that happening, but I'm just not sure. That's not really an answer, but
no, I think that is an answer because I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I don't think it's currently a buy now situation. I think this unfortunately kind of continues to teeter in the way that it is. I don't foresee it changing unless, both Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins both go down in the next few weeks. That's really the only way that I see the offensive scheme. God forbid, right? It's the only way I see the offensive scheme really making any changes. But I do think it's a good question. It's an interesting player profile to think about because, so much of Twitter did talk about this going into the regular season. Lots of concerns with Greg Roman's general offensive scheme in Baltimore, and seeing it now in Los Angeles, it's not necessarily a case where there's anything redeemable about it. They still do have Kamani Vidal sitting somewhere in the organization clubhouse. He's there ready for when one of those running backs does go down. So I don't know necessarily if this is a situation that turns itself on its head or what, but yeah.
All right. Cool. With the nonsense, let's talk a couple of topics here. So this one is good. Idle speed. So the scenario is you send an offer, will get the juices flowing with the person you're sending the offer to. And you can see that they saw it on Sleeper, but they haven't rejected it or even messaged you. What do you do? Couple options. Would you increase the offer, stand pat, send a message asking if you would take it, or other suggestions?
Honestly, I feel like I strike out with this almost every single time.
Mm-hmm.
I do find that every time I reach out to somebody just to be like, hey, where are you sitting at? Is there any room for negotiation? They're always like, oh, I've been thinking on it, but now, I'm not really leaning towards it or something like that. And then I usually reply, is there any wiggle room? I'm happy to add on top. And they're usually like, no, I'm good right now. It's a very funky situation for me because I usually give somewhere between 48 to 72 hours before I reach out. And maybe that's too much time. I don't really know. And I haven't found a good way to work through it. But what I will say is that a trade that is more likely to happen is one in which someone kind of immediately responds to. And the
Yes.
ones that sit there for a while, I would say, are either forgotten about or someone is contemplating it, but they're like almost on like two sides of the scale. Like they're contemplating it so much because they either think they're going to get royally fucked or it's going to be like a smash. Like there's never that ability of like, it's taken 2 days for them to realize, you know what, this is a fair trade. Instead, it's usually like, I think I'm either going to lose out entirely on this or, you know what, this might actually pan out for one of us.
You almost like, yeah, you hit on pretty much everything I was gonna say. My thought is the way he Billy wrote the sheet for us. Dude's like under the weather, about to die, and he put together the sheet for us. So God bless him. The thing he says, he's gonna offer, and we'll get the juices flowing. The thing is, I feel like if it's an offer, at least from my perspective, ones that I've received or whatever, like if it's actually something really intriguing, you're gonna get traction quick.
Yes.
Like it's gonna happen within the next, with the next hour or whatever. If it's something that's really mid and they're not really all about, they're either gonna forget about it. So like I'll come back to it or whatever. And if it's a situation where like, yeah, maybe I'll just come back to it, unless you're a really damn good salesman, they're probably not interested in that offer anyway. Some people just don't take the time just to reject it and they're like, oh, I'll take care of this later. Every once in a while you might have it to where they're like need to reach out to their buddies, people that they trust, and things like that and talk about it. But even that doesn't take very long. So I don't know. There's a lot to do. Honestly, if it was something that I thought was close, I might just resend with like a little something extra and then see if that actually gets the juices flowing. If not, then it's probably just a non-starter most of the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think to the first question, would you increase the offer or stand pat? I do think that I'm more likely to increase the offer, knowing that I typically don't send my best offer immediately. And I'm more likely to inch closer to what I think maximum value is for that trade in that kind of small window of uncertainty. And then the other suggestion piece really for me is trying to gauge what are some other assets that are in the league that you're looking at that could maybe be with people who are more active or more communicative in trading. I think at the end of the day, I want to deal with people who aren't going to kind of interact with trades this way. And it's not because I think of them negatively. It's just like there's always multiple assets that you should be looking at within certain windows or certain valuations, certain tiers. And there's no reason to just be so dead set on this one specific offer that you've sent. Go out there and send some other ones that are somewhere in that same space. You might even be able to get a similar-ish player for cheaper with potential similar output and not be stuck, paying up the wazoo for that type of player. And to Andres' point, if you are in a league with people that it could be beneficial just to be really blunt with them and reach out to them. Showing up to their doorstep is really interesting. But I do like the idea of like phone call or FaceTime, just to actually hear the voice-to-voice conversation. I've definitely done some trade negotiations with people who don't do trade negotiations well via text or sleeper DMs and have found that I can actually get trades done with them more frequently in person. So it's definitely not bad advice. Just don't scare the living shit out of someone for a trade by showing up to their door. This is modern day America. You might get your ass shot. So be understanding. Yeah.
I got a long driveway. You better think twice. But no, it's very good. I real quickly, I do work with a guy who he's in a keeper league, right? But they keep like 7, so it's close. It's getting close to Dynasty.
Yeah, it is.
And all his trades he makes via phone call, and he trades more than I do. And
that's awesome.
9 Dynasty leagues, something like that, and he trades in his one league a little bit more than I do across all my leagues. So there might be something to it.
Definitely. I think that's super cool. Kind of envious of the fact that they're in leagues where you can basically communicate directly with people. I do think that there is a lot more value there. I tend to get more trades done with closer friends that I can just text immediately after I send something than I do via either like, Console War is a great example. I don't do well in that league because I don't know most people. So the best way for me to reach out to them is either DM in what is that, WhatsApp or group me.
Yeah,
Or when they don't respond
shoot
to
me.
that, I then have to, blast the whole league to let them know that I have reached out to these two people. And they're like, oh, who's the similar asset between those two teams? Like, I feel like I'm giving away so much information when I have to do stuff like that. So I try my best to not, but uh, unfortunately, certain leagues work that way.
All right. So the last topic here is forced to fail. Can compounding injuries to multiple star players on your team force you into a minor rebuild or to forfeit the year? Is week too early to call it? And how do you manage rosters struggling in that way? There's a lot to that, and it's very topical for us right now. Uh, I think there is one league where if like I have basically like two choices right now. I have fairly high end assets that are on IR right now. And I think that the smart move, since I feel like I'm contending, is to move those players. But when you do that, you're tearing down like 100% of the time. Like nobody's going to give you an IR Pacheco value that you get for healthy Pacheco, right?
Yeah.
So whatever player you're getting back, is it really helping you? Like I feel like maybe this is like quitting mentality, but on me, I'm like shit. Like I don't want to lose out on that. Like I don't think that if I was contending with these star players that are now injured, that the replacement players I could get in a trade are going to still keep me contending. Like I what that's a question I ask myself. Like is it really going to bring me back up to where I was before? And I don't think it will. But the smart move is if you are contending to get those IR players off. Me, I'm just like a hopeful, uh, glass half full type of guy. Like, hey, they're going to come back and they're going to carry me from week 7 on the way out. I could just ride this storm for the next 5 weeks. But you end up going, I don't know, 2-3, 1-4 over the next 5 weeks. You're in a situation at this point where you might be forced to rebuild and forced to sell, or hope that those guys that are on your IR come back healthy next year, or don't get a replacement drafted ahead of them, things like that. So it's really, really tricky situation dealing with this right now. For me, what I'm doing is just kind of like, hey, relying on the depth I have, knowing other teams are injured too. But there is one roster where like most of the big name guys that have been injured are on this one team of mine. And it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't have a really good answer for it. I just think that the smart, heady answer is to sell your IR guys to try to keep going. Otherwise, know what kind of situation you're getting in, and you're just really running on hopium at this point that they're going to come back healthy and help you.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good advice. I would say for me, it's also about like the age of the asset or the positional aspect of that specific type of player. So, for instance, we were talking about Tua before, and you brought up Pacheco. I think those are two really good examples of guys that I would be trying to get off of probably sooner rather than later if I know that there is an individual who is willing to pay even close to market value. I'm not talking about like what Pacheco's market value was 2 weeks ago, but close to what his market value is currently, even with the injury designation. I just don't see Pacheco being a long-term viable asset in Dynasty. I intentionally sold off of him earlier this offseason, thinking that I'm obviously not, some type of like fortune teller, can't see the future, didn't know he was going to get injured. I got super lucky there, but that is a reality of those types of assets, just knowing, lack of draft capital, understanding the organization and how they basically can run through any running back that they want to and make it successful. That just puts me in a situation where I want to get off that asset as soon as possible. And then with Tua's situation, we're talking about, the continuous health concern. It really does kind of question kind of what my line is and where it might be standing if, he comes back in 5 weeks, 6 weeks and gets another concussion. Like, I'm probably not going to get anything for him. Like, I think even a fourth from someone would be like, there might be the people that will throw out, the third or the fourth because, you can. But if I can still somehow find a way to package, maybe an interesting running back like a Jalen Wright or a Blake Corum and an early second, I'd probably take that for Tua right now. And I know that probably sounds crazy to a lot of people, but I know that the window of opportunity for someone like that is so small given the health concerns there that I'd much rather do that, even if it means in that small window that I could be quote unquote rebuilding. But I think with those assets, I might be able to package them differently and find something better in the future, specifically at quarterback. Because what are you getting Tua for right now? You're getting Tua for
second.
Will Levis. Like if you went quarterback for quarterback, that's not something I want to be doing like at all. So like what's the window of value return that you're really looking for is kind of the way that I see it. And I think you brought up a lot of great points with regards to the compounding injury conversation. And I don't really have much else to say there. The only thing I will say is with regards to is week 2 too early? I think it is. Unless you're truly dealing with, you have Puka, you have Tua, you have Pacheco, you have Cooper Kupp, you have potentially AJ Brown, who knows what his situation is going to be like. Maybe you even have Tyreek Hill feeding off of the Tua situation. There's probably a space there where you should be honest with yourself and say, this is not my year. I need to get off Tyreek Hill. He's healthy. Maybe I need to wait until he has a big week, even with Skylar Thompson, and hope that his value can retain itself. But yeah, this is a difficult situation. But I do think that week 2 is too early with guys like T. Higgins or even AJ Brown. Like they're probably out for a limited window. And if those are the guys that are preventing your team from winning in the first couple of weeks,
you are a contender.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just before we head on the trades, I think that there are a couple things here that, after hearing you speak, got me to think a little bit more. But like trying to avoid going from being contending one year to rebuilding the next year. That is like the saddest thing you could possibly do. So I wouldn't want to just sell off those IR players for picks or anything like that, because then you're just a situation where like won't be till the year after that, most likely, unless you're really good at trading, that you're going to be contending again. What I had thought of, let's say you had your Cup, your Pacheco, or your Cup and your Tua, right? Those are the two oldest, most volatile IR guys right now.
Yep.
Sending a massive overpay like a Cup and a Tua to another team for maybe another stud player, something that like you never would have got done or would have thought about doing before the season started. But since they are on IR, that possibly you go ahead and send off, a Cup and a Pacheco, or because those two are likely to come back this year. Tua might be coming back this year, but like two of those guys and like a pick for somebody like Chase for like sell 2 stud IR guys for 1 stud non-IR guy that you never would have thought about doing weeks ago. That might be something to consider, if that makes sense.
It does. I think you brought up a really interesting name that hasn't really been discussed all that much, especially on the pod, is Jamar Chase. We're talking about a player who's dealing with basically not having a preseason. He just looks realistically like a dude who is not ready to be playing pro football right now, right? Like generally slow, doesn't have great chemistry with his quarterback right now, just off. But he doesn't look necessarily unhealthy. Maybe even a little demotivated because he isn't getting paid. Things like that just, I think, generally kind of fit the bill of what I saw from Jamar Chase in the small window of NFL football I was able to watch. There are definitely owners out there that are scared shitless of this situation. And if you are a true contender, to Uriah's point, maybe he is a player that you can maybe find a way into by packaging, quote unquote, more tenable assets that have potential future, and by future I mean this specific season, have future value. Pacheco will be back this season. Puka will be back this season. Cup will be back this season. They have value this season that you can potentially put into some type of package. And I'm not saying those players specifically, but those players plus something else where it's a very advantageous buy for you for Jamar Chase, knowing that probably by week 4, 5, or 6, he'll be probably back to 100% and performing at a really high level. The rest of that team, is pretty suspect, but I have to trust the talent, and I think that would probably be a really solid person to be looking at. So that's a great shout.
All right, before we move on to trades, I just want to say shout out to Jake being under the weather. Obviously, a little bit more healthy than Bailey. Thanks for coming on and doing this with us. I know that we are probably wrapping this up a lot sooner than we normally have, but I think it's best for us all. Really appreciate you, my dude.
I love being here.
Trades and non-trades. So we have Jackson Smith and Jigba, Target Hog, Target Monster, week 2, plus Will Levis, Billy Blue Jeans, a 25 third for a 27 first, a 26 second, and Dontavian Wicks. Again, that's JSN, Will Levis, 25 third for 27 first, 26 second, and Wicks. I love the JSN side here. Absolutely love it. I don't care about a 27 first. I don't hardly care about a 27 second or 26 second. And Wicks is 3rd wide receiver. Like, I don't care. JSN will Levis. That's it for me. Honestly, I'm going to ride Levis for most of the season here and then try to sell off him because I don't think he's long for the league.
Not to feed off of the conversation we just had, but forced to fail was the presence that we just talked about, or the topic we just talked about. This situation happened to my DU2 team. My DU2 team just came off of winning the league. I have Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown. We forgot about someone else, Jake Ferguson, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp, James Conner, and then at quarterback I have Jalen Hurts and Jordan Love. So needless to say, I've just said so many players that are currently injured, right?
Dang.
I was sitting there looking at this team, sitting literally at a bar I think at the time I was in Copenhagen, probably a little too intoxicated. And I said to myself, this team's too good. This team's too good. I think this team's too good. I don't want to give up this season. And this was after week 1. This was after I woke up the next day, because the Monday night games and Sunday night games, I don't know if, this was the Friday night game. I woke up that Saturday morning and Jordan Love injured himself on the final play of the game. I had no idea. I literally woke up the next day to this news, and it was truly terrible because games there started at 2:30 in the morning. There was no way of me knowing that this had occurred. So I said to myself, what is a good window for players that I think have relatively high ceilings that I can go in and buy that I think will probably turn it around? Because I saw JSN's week after that, and I sent out this offer, I want to say on either Monday or Tuesday. It wasn't that actual Saturday, but that's when I saw the Jordan Love news. And I said to myself, you know what? I think this is a really good time for me to try and go after JSN. He killed it on the first drive. I don't know if anyone saw that. He caught 2 balls for 20 yards and then didn't get targeted again until the 3rd quarter. And I was just there's something about the game script that said to me that they wanted to get him more involved. And for some reason, it just fell out. I didn't watch any of the tape. I'll be honest. This isn't I'm a tape hawk. I know advanced metrics. No, none of that. I just read literal box score play-by-plays, and I saw how he was being used, and it made sense to me to try and buy in on him on a slight dip. I saw the same thing with Will Levis and how he was getting destroyed for that absolute boneheaded. It wasn't It was the pick that he threw in week
Yeah.
1,
Yeah.
which was
He was
bad.
doing good up until then.
He really was. So
Yeah.
I decided to go on YouTube and I do my standard, like all dropbacks by X player week 1. Did it for Will Levis. Honestly, he looked totally fine. And I was like, I hope that the tape says enough to me that I'm cool with this. So I sent out the offer and I said to myself, whatever happens, happens. Once again, this was to a friend. So we'll bring up the other piece of idle speeds and understanding how to work through trade negotiations. And I sent a text straight to a buddy of mine. And I said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Does this kind of work? I know you're rebuilding. I know you want to get off some of these assets. Does this make sense? The 26th second is his, so he can control his own destiny. And the 27th first was mine. Like I said, I have a lot of depth all over this team that I think I can kind of maneuver around so that this quote unquote contending team can continue to contend. I just need to be a little patient. So I sent it over. He came back and was like, I don't know how I feel about it. Give me a few hours. A few hours turned into like a day. He sent a counter. I sent him back a counter. And this is what we got to. And I feel really confident with it. Just in the sense that I think I've recouped probably JSN's value off of one game and his usage. Because I think people are finally seeing the light that there is a true target hawk receiver there in terms of a true possession, almost like probably used similarly to Chris Godwin for however many years in Tampa style receiver. That type of player has a lot of extended value in Dynasty, especially in true PPR, and that's what we're playing in. So it just made a ton of sense to me. It worked out after week 1, and I ended up losing in that league because AJ Brown and Jake Ferguson also ended up getting injured. It happens. It does. But this is the type of deal that I think you can start looking at trying to make in these types of windows where, you aren't necessarily forced to fail, even though your roster might be telling you otherwise. So just something to be mindful of.
Very good. All right. Last one, we have CeeDee Lamb. Ooh. CeeDee Lamb for Roma Dunze and his dad. plus the 26 first and a 27 first. So basically what would be looked at 6 months ago as 3 firsts for CeeDee Lamb. I don't know why you do it. If you're rebuilding and Lamb was like the best piece you had on your team and everything else was trash, I could see doing that. But if you have like 3 or 4 other good pieces on there, I'm not sending 2 firsts in Rome I'm not sending Lamb away for Rome and 2 firsts at all.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. This is probably the price that you can get maybe like Jamar Chase at right now because of his slight decline. And maybe I would be okay with this if I was in the same situation that you're describing. This isn't what I want to give up CeeDee Lamb for. And, this is the same situation where we talk about like his future is literally, it's just defined. It's truly defined in Dallas. They got the contract done. They got the quarterback contract done. The quarterback contract isn't done, but
it is.
Oh, it is. It is. Sorry.
Yeah, 3 minutes before kickoff week 1, or 3 hours before kickoff week 1. Yeah,
the perfect time to announce it.
Jared,
I'll blame that on the EU because they controlled my Twitter usage. But but that's the type of situation you want to buy in on if you can get it at this price. And when we talk about Jamar Chase, it's the exact polar opposite. Hasn't solidified his future yet. Is constantly causing an issue about his contracts, even though he still has, I believe, 2.5 or 3 years left on his contract.
Yeah, this is not the last year. Yeah,
it's not his last year, and there's no need for him to be pushing this. And so we're seeing like this type of trade happen. It does make you question kind of the intentions of like where that individual like wants to be going with their team. And if it is rebuild, I do think that you could be getting potentially more. I know the other thing that I did want to add is in this trade, the person who traded away their 2 firsts have like either 3 or 4 firsts coming up in the 2025 draft. And it really does make me question the person who's acquiring the picks in Rome. Why are you not pushing harder for those 25 firsts? Because I think that they're just significantly more fluid. They have a little bit more understood value because you know what you're actually acquiring because you can see those teams and their rosters. Why are you trying to gamble so far in the future that this guy or team won't be able to perform in 2026 or 2027? With that
That's
all
a
being
great point.
said, it's just like get CD Lamb every single time. But it was a fun trade to see go down. It was one of those where I was like, I didn't have my notifications on because I didn't want to get all of my roaming charges from AT&T. You go fuck yourselves, AT&T. But I did go on to the sleeper app every like 45 minutes, pretending I was going to the bathroom when I got connected to Wi-Fi and saw this, and I was just like, this is a fun trade at bare minimum. So it's always cool to see these trades go down, especially so early in the season. I think this will probably redirect the team that also acquired CD Lamb. I don't know if they were necessarily trying to contend this year, but I think this forces you to contend because of the rest of the roster that team has. So it's fun all around, and I think it's great for the league. So all for it.
Awesome. Hey man, we did it. Anything else you want to talk about, or you want to get some cough drops and some NyQuil and
literally
hit the
that's
bed?
what I'm gonna drink. Some vitamin C. I'm going to probably try and sleep 10 hours tonight, and then I'm going to
Hell yeah.
watch my first full-length NFL game tonight, and I'm going to be so excited about it, even though it's a terrible game. We have the New York Jets against the Patriots. It's going to be awful, but it's going to be my first game of the year that I get to watch from kickoff to the end, and it's going to be a blessing. So excited. Thank you for having me as always. Hopefully we'll be back soon, and I'll be in full health. And so will Billy.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching us, listening to us. Obviously, you probably know where to find us, but on Twitter, Dynasty Underdog, you're at Dawkins, at Willie Beeman FF, and at Jake Abrams. Join our Discord. Have a good night.